are at and where we want to be in life. Each one of us is constantly told, and like Zainab said, it's not about gender. The various roles that we play as humans at different stages of life, we are told, oh, you can't do this, or you can't do that, or you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that. And that's the call out to challenge that which has been said. If you're a father, then this is what is expected of you. If you're a mother, then this is what you should do. If you have a role as a daughter or as a citizen of a particular culture, various things that we are constantly told to do or not do. And most of the times, because we want to belong, because we want to, not be seen as different, we tend to play along. And the journey that I want to share with you is about where we are able to reach if we actually don't just play along. If we talk about saying, I'd want to make a difference, not for the world, I'm not talking about changing everything around, changing our own lives. So it's not gender, it's not about a woman, it's just about a person who's looking at sharing part of that journey. And which is why I call it challenging the status quo. I also call it scale your own Everest. Some of you probably did read the profile that got shared. And a few years back, I had the privilege of being able to scale Mount Everest. That journey is what I'm going to talk to you about. And while I share my Everest journey, I want each one of us to get in touch with our own Everests, whatever those are, right? We're constantly dealing with them, stereotypes, dealing with family and family relationships, sometimes dealing with our own, oh, I think I want to get fitter, so tomorrow I'm going to go to the gym, and never really reaching there, right? Sometimes it's about, oh, I think I want to quit smoking, or I want to quit drinking, or any of those, and then that inability to be able to go do that. And it's an Everest, right? It is an Everest. So Everest is not just that. To me, it was the physical mountain, but every one of us has our own Everests. And the invitation is to walk along on this journey and see if any of it really helps us look at our own Everests in terms of, would we want to keep it going. I've put together a few pictures, some of it just the journey of reaching there, what made me go there. And some of them are pictures from the mountains. And I'd really ask, since we don't have a very large crowd in here right now, feel free to sort of raise your hand and ask a question whenever it comes to your mind as we go along. And I will answer before I move from there. So don't wait for, a particular question answer session. That enables us to keep it in time, and we don't drive it like that. So anytime, wherever you think there's a question, just go ahead and ask that, right? So may I begin? All right. So, I'm going to show up a picture here, Everest, that word. I'm usually doing an assignment with the Everest massage, right? Of yours that you think is great. So that's what working, break, because that changed. Put a cast on that leg, all fine, and life was all okay. Unfortunately, or well, fortunately, a month later, another bone on the other leg broke. And now I couldn't hobble around. I needed, some sort of crutch as a support to walk around. Fine, one hobbled, wondered what the hell, how much can, coincidence or whatever you want to call it. But it didn't stop at that. Within 3 months, I think I had enough and more broken bones in my body for no rhyme or reason, really. I'd do the smallest of tasks and my bones would break. I'd cook something in the kitchen and my wrist bone ended up breaking. I had an elbow that had a problem. My shoulder started coming out of its ball socket. My knee started rolling out of its ball socket. It just essentially created or increased the dependency. And from a so-called normal person who was moving around doing everything, I ended up in a wheelchair with no reason as to what was going wrong. I had become this medical experiment ground with various things being attempted. Typically, the first thing we got to hear was, oh, you are, you know, a little over 40. 40 is when for women osteoporosis starts off, and that's what is happening to you. You know, your bones are getting weak. Let's look at calcium, etc. When the few more bones broke and along with it came the pain, then we said, okay, possibly it's early arthritis, and you know, possibly there's rheumatoid arthritis. Some tests done, we ruled that out. Then a few more bones broke, and they said possibly there is some sort of, you know, cancer is a very interesting word. When we don't have solutions to things, we identify it as possibly cancer, right? And then we start investigating those. So those happened, and still those, each one of those tests, biopsies, various tests. I think I was living outside a hospital. Every time I had doctors give me a different set of medication, and every time one bone healed, the other one would snap, and we didn't know. The dependency to that wheelchair really increased. And before I knew, as I said, I was in this wheelchair being told that I would never really walk without support again. And some of the largest hospitals put that out, saying this is what is going to happen. It wasn't that I couldn't walk without a wheelchair, and yet it just made it easier. It was less painful, and I could move more easier there. It was only in that wheelchair that I looked at the world very differently. Because till then, I was traveling everywhere, I could do whatever, and India, for all its diversity and attempt at inclusion, we are not disabled friendly at all. We just don't know what to do with our disabled, right? Our intent is good, we are very kind, but we don't know what to do with them, right? So the only thing was, okay, I guess you're going to stay at home. Just getting around the house was a challenge, getting out of the house was a challenge. If I came abroad, it was all right, you know, I had ability to move, but in terms of back home, there was always a challenge. And then I didn't really know what was that option that I had. Could I continue like this? And I did for about a year and a half. And then one fine day I told myself, this is not how I'm going to live. Right? I choose what I'm going to do with myself. And interestingly, my brother, he's a doctor, by the way, and he's sort of in Canada. He's a Canadian citizen, and you know, I spoke with him. And he said, look, your results or your reports don't tell me much. The medicines that they're giving are largely a cocktail for painkillers. I don't see, because we don't know the cause, how do we really heal it? So I said, all right, so what do we do? And he said, well, the only thing that's happening is the bones are breaking. So let's look at a possibility of, you know, strengthening the muscle. If we strengthen the muscle, it will reduce the weight on the bones, and that should be able to perhaps, and then we will start sort of, you know, adding, let's see what vitamin deficits or whatever that will help you build that bone. So that's where that journey began. And you know, like they say, when you have something to prove, there's nothing greater than a challenge. And I took that on. One fine day when I decided saying no more, I don't want to live like this anymore, I put out that intent saying, and I said that to my brother in a bit of a fit of rage. I said, you know what, I'm done. From this very minute, no more wheelchair, no more doctors, no more medicines. Starting tomorrow morning, I'm going to start walking, I will run, I will do whatever it takes to prove you guys wrong. Right? I'm going to prove the medical science is wrong, I'm going to prove the doctors wrong. I'm going to walk and show you, I'm going to run, I'm going to cycle, I'm going to reach the highest point on earth. Right? And it got said in a fit of rage because I said, who's somebody else to tell me what do I do with my life or not do with my life? And that's when I said that to him, and you know, he was in Canada. It was sort of his evening, his morning time. I was exhausted from the day, and he said, listen, why don't you just sleep? We'll talk about this tomorrow morning. And I did sort of go to bed. Next morning, my morning, he says, how are you feeling now? And I said, you know, I'm feeling okay. But what I said yesterday, I mean that. I'm going to prove everybody wrong. And he says, all right, so just for your information, you know, the highest point on earth is Everest. And I said, okay, so what? I will climb Everest. I had no clue what I was talking about. Right? I had absolutely no clue. Like all the students in India, I'd probably read in a book that Everest was the highest mountain. One vaguely remembered the numbers from the school book that said 8,848 meters. And like all Indians, I believe that it was a mountain, in the Indian Himalayas, right? Which it isn't. It's in Nepal, and then part of Tibet through China sort of owns it, right? They claim stake to it, so it's not really in India. But I said that to him, and I said, so be it. This is what I'm going to do. And then began that journey of putting that out there. He said, what are you going to do? And I said, you tell me, you're the doctor, so tell me what to do. Other than medicine, tell me what to do. And I said, okay, let's start building muscle. So I said, all right, so do I join the gym? And he says, no, please don't join the gym. The gym's going to make it tougher. Why don't you start running? I can't even walk. I said, well, you've asked for it, so now think about it, and do you want to be a part of this? And that's when I said, all right, if that's what it takes, that's what I'm going to do. And sure enough, I took that first step out and began my running journey. I started off with that first kilometer, taking one step at a time. So first 10 meters, I would have friends who supported. They'd take that wheelchair along, they would come along. I would run a little exhausted, go back, sit in it for a break, but I never sat in it long enough to feel, caught up with it. I started participating in any and every run that existed around the place that allowed me to run. I would fall sometimes, I'd get lifted sometimes. I started climbing, walking, doing all sorts of crazy things there to be able to build that muscle. And then, like they say, when you put out that intent, things happen, right? We ask and the universe provides. It always does. Our challenge is perhaps that we don't ask. But for me, it was about beginning to run. It also was in various, as I said, events, and then I was cross-training, because now I started seriously looking at Everest. What did that mean? I started reading about a mountain that I knew nothing about. And then, okay, so there are two sides to it. There is a north and there's a south. Most people go from the south. The first summit was from south, which is Nepal, by the way. Right? People don't go from the north. Okay, why don't they go from the north? Because it's more technical, it's tougher, and it's a challenge. And I said, all right, so then that's where I'm going to go from, right? Why would I take the easy way out? Just because it's there, we don't do that. It's also more expensive from the north, but I said, doesn't matter. One has to go the crooked way. So began that run, started prepping. For someone who had never even trekked in my lifetime, I began looking at treks. I said Everest meant technical training, so I needed to be able to, I went in and enrolled for courses. We have 5 institutes in India that teach you mountaineering courses. 4 of them turned me down saying, you're overage. We can't take you on. 3 of them had 35 as their cutoff. The 4th one had 40 as their cutoff. Then someone told me, try the 5th one. This time I was smarter. I didn't call them and ask them. I filled in the form first, sent the money, and landed up there on the day the course was to begin. And I had the chief instructor look at me and he says, aren't you a little over age? And I'm saying, it's all right. If you don't look at the age, I won't tell myself I'm that old, and let's just get on with that course, right? And a couple of reasons to do that course, really. One, because I needed to understand, I had chosen the north side, which was the technical climbing. I needed to know what was involved in that course. So I took that up and I said, all right, north side, the course would help me understand. Also because if I did get an A grade in that basic course, I qualified to do an advanced course. And that advanced course had an expedition involved, which meant in the course fee of the advanced course, I could actually do an expedition. And that course fee was very, very minimalistic. I could actually be able to pay for an expedition just out of that money, and that's what drove me to get to that expedition. So sure enough, took up that course and I went there, and there are some pictures of me from that institute where I got accepted, did my basic. Like you can see out there in that picture in the corner, all the kids who were part of that course. I was obviously the oldest in the batch. We were 107 of us learning, because the state where this institute is, there's a lot of snowfall, and primary employment is in mountaineering and trekking. So the government makes it mandatory that if you're going to be a trek guide, you need to have gone through the course, otherwise they don't give you a license to be a guide. So a lot of these youngsters come for that course. After me, the next oldest person in that group was someone who was a year younger than my eldest child. And that was that age difference that existed. Right? So when we started off, some of these people initially said, ma'am this, ma'am that. Then some of them got around to auntie. Eventually it was mummy, which is where I was at. And it was funny that mummy every morning got up and went running with these kids, went crawling under stuff and asking myself, saying, what am I doing? Why am I even here? It's all right for these children. And my teacher would say that to me. He said, now you're old. If bones break, I said, well, they're already broken. We can't break any further. Let me just be here and do the course. And luckily enough, that determination, that grit helped. It wasn't that the bones had stopped breaking. Part of that course, I went through wearing casts on my legs, but continuing to push for it. So that particular first picture there was because my cast got stuck in this little rock ridge and I was trying to pull my leg down, but lived with it and continued to do, saying, clear me on my merit, not because I want to be in this course, but because I should be. So that piece and that journey continued to help me get my degree that I wanted. And we could actually, I cleared it with the A grade that I wanted, so went in for this expedition in the B grade course that I had. And that really led to a success on anything and everything that I did. The age didn't matter. I was finishing, like this first picture, I ran a 75 kilometers. And that 75 kilometers was not about running 75. The intention was I had to be on my feet because the allowed time for those 75 was 11 hours. And on Everest, the final summit push takes a person about 11 hours. So the intent was just that. I had put that out as my goal, and anything and everything that I did was towards Everest. I wasn't spending even one day or one moment or one action that didn't in some form or the other help me towards that mountain. Because then that became the goal, that one just looked at it saying there it was. So I ran on those terrains that helped me build some muscle. I ran distances or time basis that. I started various climbs. So that particular picture with the group, us having summited, was of a 6,000 meter mountain because I couldn't straight go to 8,000. I did a couple of 5,000ers, then I did a 6,000, then I did a 7,000, and I eventually went to attempt the Everest. And of course, for cross training, cycling was critical. I was sharing with the ladies earlier on in the morning today about my picking up a cycling race where none of the women had ever attempted it because it was across 2 different states. It meant cycling alone as a woman across 31 hours. I mean, 31 was what was allowed to my age category. There's always an advantage of the age that you get more time versus some of the other youngsters who had to wrap it up. But 548 kilometers to be wrapped up in 31 hours, I didn't have the luxury of sleeping because I cycled so slow. So consistently 31 hours of cycling, of finishing that race. But then so many other women that came up to participate a few years later saying, okay, and flag off the race, which, as I said earlier, there were no participants. The year that I got invited to flag it off was with 32 women participants who'd now taken that journey up, right? And then, of course, the actual journey that began, that getting to Everest. Convincing my family was, I think, one of those steps. Letting my children know, letting my parents know that I may or may not come back from here, because that was a mental prep that needed. My kids needed to know that I was going away. I think they kept thinking I'm probably pulling a fast one. No one really believed I would actually go. Till the time that I finally went and I chopped off my hair because I just had extremely long tresses. And when I chopped that off, they believed that, okay, she's serious. She would have never touched her hair otherwise. So now this is serious business. She means to. My father has a lot of exposure to the mountains. He was in the Indian Armed Forces, so he did know what I was getting in for. My mother, not so sure, whether she understood what that cold meant, what the gear meant, what it meant. All she knew was I was going to be away for 2 months. And, I was attempting something that people were saying is going to be difficult. But all along the way, I think I genuinely had fun. because while the mountain was something I was aiming for, I was also very clear that I wanted to enjoy every day that came as an opportunity. You know, each minute of it was gratitude that helped me get there, right? And there, you know, we have, yeah, that's one of my Sherpa friends. We have, these guys are amazing. We can't really look at climbing without them. At the same time, I'd want to clarify and share that, you know, a lot of people believe that the Sherpa takes you up the mountain. They don't. There is no space for you to do that. Later, when I share some of the actual pictures of the mountain, you'll realize that on the north side, the widest space I had was about 18 inches. Now, in 18 inches, you cannot fit in 2 people. There's no way that's going to happen. The distance and the angle is such that no one can really pull you up. So you have to. For each one of us, to the top of Everest and our own Everest, it's an individual journey. You may have a Sherpa who acts as your guide. You may have a Sherpa who perhaps shows you the way, but eventually it is your own journey. I really pray that in your journey to your Everest, you find your own Sherpa. But remember that that Sherpa is not going to take you far. You're going to have to go on your own in that journey. Right? And then you reach base camp. The way things work, as I said, it's a 2 months journey in total, the expedition part of it. So 4 years of prepping up. The day that I declared to my brother that I would scale Everest, I had no idea what I was talking about. But within 3 months, things fell in place where it took me to the base camp of Everest on a trek with a friend. And that first trek I did practically on my crutches. The friend had faith. She said, I think you can come along. If people can walk with walking poles, you can walk with crutches. And since then, since my own scaling, of course, every year I've been taking a group to Everest Base Camp. And I've had all sorts of people go with me, people who are blind, people who are paraplegic. This year in October, I'm going again with a group where I have one girl who'd been through an accident and then has had a severe brain injury. So one part of her body doesn't move. Her parents are very keen that she go along. A brilliant child who's lost a lot of stuff in that accident, and she's coming along. And the second guy is somebody who's paralyzed waist below. He wanted to attempt this, and someone told him he should get in touch with me, and he said, I want to climb Everest. And I said, sure. He said, I want to go to base camp, not climb Everest. He said, I want to go to base camp. And I said, sure. He said, I want you to know that I'm paralyzed waist below. And I said, okay, so do you move in a wheelchair? And he says, no, I use 2 sticks to walk. I said, sure. So we'll use the same sticks and we'll go to base camp. And he was like, that's exactly what my friend told me you would tell me. So I think I'm in the right hands. So yes, October we're planning to go. And that's been consistent. This year, October, when I take that group, it's going to be my 10th trip to base camp. But every single year that we've been going. And the reason I'm sharing that is not because you know, we do this, but because you put out an intent, and if you've really made up your mind, there is nothing that you can't achieve. You know, absolutely everything becomes possible. Everything falls in place, and just about anything is possible. You just have to want it hard enough. You have to be able to see it as a vision. And sure enough, for me too, I took off from India. I went to Kathmandu. I took a flight from Kathmandu to Tibet, and then from Tibet went on to the base camp. That was all by road. And then, of course, from base camp began the journey of getting used to the mountain, going up and down every day. I did carry my, you know, casts in my bag every time, telling myself I wouldn't wear them, but carrying them sensibly, saying if I needed them, I didn't want to lose the climb because of that. So that, that's really, those are some of the pictures from the mountains. We have this nice little prayer that happens before we begin. Everybody comes together. You pray to the mountain gods for success. And in terms of data, just to share with you, you know, after the first climb that happened, when we looked at Tenzing Norgay and, you know, Hillary climbed Everest. Since then, if I talk about numbers, till about last year, you know, till about, including the pandemic, including the times that they were closed, etc. If I talk about numbers, about 4,500 people have scaled Everest from the south side. In comparison, in the same time frame from the north, there are about 8 or 100 people. The reason, as I said, there are a couple of combinations. One, it's technical. B, it's tougher. C, it's more expensive. D, ever since China has controlled, they don't just give out as many permits. So various reasons why people will not attempt it from the north side. But also because the weather changes so much dramatically that people who are at the base camp not necessarily make it to the top. Even the year that I went and scaled, we were 169 people when the season began. Eventually, 19 of us summited, and out of which only 46 had attempted the climb. Right? So it's just something that happens there in terms of conversion. 1/4 possibly make it through at any point in time. It just is the way the mountain is. So the efforts are what we can put in. Eventually, the outcome is something that's way beyond our reach. When I set out to do anything, I'm asking myself, have I put in my best efforts? Because that's the only thing that I can do, right? The yak is a creature that's, that survives there, and a beautiful creature. They're very silly in the head, which is what makes them survive there. You don't want a thinking creature there. You just want a doing creature there, because that's what they do. But also because I learned a very beautiful lesson from these yak. They are the only ones that survive at that altitude. They carry crazy loads, and they come all the way to advance. Of course, they don't go beyond advanced camp, but advanced camp is at 6,400 meters, right? And 6,400 is a lot. I mean, if you multiply that, you're talking about 19,000 odd plus, in fact, a little more than that, by way of feet. And they are there, but the lovely part is, the way they reach there is they have their head down, and they just keep taking one step at a time. And that's something that I've applied to everything that I do. I constantly, this morning I got asked that question saying, what's the best advice? And I said, I get told, slow down. And that was one thing that I learned from the yak, saying, slow down. Right? The mountain's always going to be there. If today I'm not successful at attempting or scaling my Everest, I'm going to come back tomorrow with renewed energy. But one step at a time. We just have to take that first step. So they usually have this young, sort of bullish yak at the start of that yak train. So he takes that lead, and then everybody just plods along one step at a time. Anything that we want to achieve, that journey of that one step makes all that difference, and that's where I truly love these creatures for what they are. Those are just some views of along the way. That's what we call the interim camp. As I was mentioning, it just gets steeper and narrower and more critical, and there is no place to really walk anywhere. You're kind of sliding as you attempt to keep walking. That's us at the advanced camp. It's gotten narrower, where we had one person, one tent on the base camp. By the time you come to advance, you between 2 and 3 people to one tent, and that's how you're trying to fit in. From camp 1, you could be any number if you're able to get your head into the tent and find some cover for the night, but that's really the way the climb happens, and that's us at the advanced camp. That's an angle there that tells you the kind of snow. I love this picture. It reminds me of vanilla ice cream, and I think it's just amazing, right? As I mentioned, I was out there to have fun with the journey. There was no point in looking at that snow saying, oh my God. There was fun in looking at it and saying, oh wow, vanilla, right? So that's really what attitude you choose to go in with. Am I going to allow the circumstances to beat me, or am I going to allow, to take it in my stride is a choice I have, right? Just something about pictures, and everything gets frozen no matter what you do. The temperatures are crazy. The night that we summited, the previous night, there was a huge storm. And due to that storm, everything was frozen. But the next day was very warm because of the previous night's storm. So when we scaled up, it was a warm night. In those clothes, we were feeling warm. But when I say warm, the temperatures were at -56. And that, was warm. They say tears are salty and they don't freeze. Believe me, on Everest, everything freezes. You stop feeling yourself after a bit. There's just nothing to feel. Everything freezes over, and there's just ice in anything and everything, right? It gets crazier as you climb because there are these various crevasses, there are depths, there is just snow, there is nothing else for company. You saw a few people in that first climb picture. By the time you go up higher, you're beginning to see 2 or 3 people. There aren't enough that are coming along for you to look at. On the mountain, I do have, and those are some of those pictures. Now, that center picture, those triangles that you see, that's of course a picture from my phone, so which isn't very great. But this is called the Miracle Highway. It connects the interim to the advanced camp. And the beauty of those triangles there, while they look very small, like I said, because I have it from my cell phone, as you can see, the last picture is also a selfie. So me and A, I'm not great at pictures, B, I don't really get pictures, but I took a few. And those triangles, for what they look, these are roughly 6 to 7 storied building high. That's what is the height. And then they just stand there, and as you walk past, some of them just decide to tipple over and fall on you, which could happen. But both sides of that road, and that's why they call it the Miracle Highway, there is just black stone that's in the center. And both sides, as though planted by design, you have these tall, triangular snow ridges, well, more like ice ridges because they don't melt for whatever time frame. And they just stand there, and you keep walking through it for a good 9 odd kilometers. No one knows why it's there where it is, but it is what it is, and it's an amazing journey, and it's called that Miracle Highway because of that they just don't melt, they just stand there, and you have to wave your way through it, and it takes you to that journey. And there it is, that first sight of the mountain, a clear night, beautiful stars, and walking in your torchlight to that angle, which is going to take you up to the scale and summit. A picture, as I said, hazy from my phone, nothing great to really look at, but just the way the clouds come in a little before sunrise. Oops, okay, sorry. And that's me there at an angle taken from one below. It just gives you a perspective of where we are at. For those of you who understand angles and remember your geometry, the flattest route I had was 73 degrees. That was as flat as the route got. Rest of it was like half the times it was dangling there like that with all that weight on my back, because I was carrying my own oxygen cylinder, I was carrying all of that, and going up the mountain at a point in time when you looked at it happen, right? And then of course success does happen. Sure enough, as decided in May of 2017 when I put that out, that I did become the first woman from my state to have scaled the Mount Everest in that journey and factor. Right, I'm going to pause for a second before I talk about creating impact. Any questions that you think you have?
You are doing all this while you're working?
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, say that again.
You're doing all this while you're working? Or?
Yes. Yes. So all of this happened while I was working, while I was playing mother. It meant training for endless hours. And I know that days when I had my workshop begin at 9 in the morning, my training time would be at 2:30 in the morning. And from 2:30 to about 6, because I had targeted about 5+ hours of training every day. So I'd do about 3 hours and plan for an evening, the balance. But sure, till 5:30 or 6, and I would vary my routine basis what I was doing. But 2:30 was a safe place. I have a friend who lives in a 12-storied building. So I would go to her place and I would walk up and down those 12 stories with a 30 kg backpack, wear my shoes to break into them and get used to them. And for 2 hours, I would do those up and down every single day just to build muscle and strength and stamina. And it was safe in the building, right? At 2:30, I wasn't sure, not as much about somebody doing something, but more like, a car running me down or something if I was out on the streets and running. So I didn't run then. Then at 5:30, I was encouraging a group to run. So 2:30 to 5:30, I'd do my own thing. 5:30, get together with the group and then get others charged up to run or do the exercises that we did as a group. Come back home and then get lunch sorted. For myself, my parents are a little elderly, so I would cook for them, drop off food for them, and then head to work. So yes, those balances always happened. Right. Any other questions for anybody?
Do you have any questions from the summit?
Yes, I think I do. I'm not sure. I'm going to just check. I think I do have a picture or two because I did take one mandatory. So that picture there, the one on the left is me on the summit trying to smile. Okay, it was a challenge. I was told by the leader saying, you have to get a picture. It's needed. You can't not have a picture on the mountain. However, you needed to have the oxygen mask off. And more than that, you needed to get your sun goggles off. And you know, your hands are not working, you're exhausted. I had these grand plans of saying I will reach the mountain, and then the Indian in me wanted to sort of prostrate full and say thank you to the mountain, etc. Once I reached there wasn't enough space, right? There was just a 5x8 square where you couldn't do that. So I just went down on my knees, kind of touched my head to the foreground saying thank you, mountain, for letting me come up. And as I straightened up, of course, it was that time of the morning because all summits are always at night. You do a night push on the summit. So when we did that, as I reached and I straightened up, you know, the sun came up, and it was the most amazing sight of my life, I think, that I could see it come up, and realizing that some of that effort was truly worth it. That's when I realized that the clouds were genuinely below, right, and they were down there, and you could feel on top of the world in that sense. But that was true. And I think one of the things that we learned you know, through that journey, and which is something that I'll call upon each one of us when we're scaling our own Everest, something that we want to do is not keep it to ourselves. Whatever is the learning, the minute you share it, you start creating that impact. And that's where you know, we have our foundation that's Adventures Beyond Barriers, and there's you know, my friend and partner in the foundation. We truly believe we use sports to create inclusion, and we do a lot of these various activities that get people included, and all sorts of sports really that allows us to create that impact. I have this little video, but we can kind of skip it, but the story of another boy, if you see him there with a walker and someone supporting him with a wheelchair, a young boy who met in an accident in one of his flying attempts, and was paralyzed waist down, shoulder down, couldn't move for the longest while. Though the doctors said he could recover, but he wasn't willing to make that move. And then I shared my journey with him, egged him on, and you know, the group that I support and people that run, we'd gotten him to come in and participate and actually you know, walk. And that's something that we now run various such initiatives on. But the minute we take you know, our journey from being our own to taking it to create an impact or make a difference to somebody else is when that mountain is truly scaled. And as long as we keep it only to ourselves, sure, it's still an achievement, but giving back and being able to make that change is the most critical one, because that's where then you know, it becomes a continuous thing, right? So over to you for any questions that you may have. I'm very conscious of the time, and I've kind of attempted to keep it within the hour that was asked for. So if there are any questions, please, I see a lot of you extremely overwhelmed. Don't think too much about it. It's not all that as it sounds. Yes, question. Sorry, go ahead. I think the challenging part was, you know, the constant self-talk, because at every stage one is asking, saying, should I do this? There were more competent, capable climbers, because Everest is not something that, and especially on the north side, it's not something that anybody and everybody attempts, right? So you have people who are better than you. There are people who are way more fitter than I was. I was still concerned about saying, I don't know when something will snap. While 4 years I'd attempted to work hard at my bones and things were better, but I still didn't have a guarantee. So that self-doubt. Just before, as I mentioned, there was a bad storm and we were at Camp 2, And there was this Australian team also that was attempting to climb. A lot of people by the time, and there was delay in that particular year because the weather just wouldn't agree. Usually all climbs happen first from Nepal side because by April you've already got summits happening from Nepal. China, the summits open up only by May because that's when the season really starts happening. That year the weather was so bad that even Nepal wasn't setting up any ropes, and China did set up, finally saying, okay, we'll set that up. So we had people trickle down to, as I mentioned, barely some 45, 46 people who attempted going up. And there was this Australian team, a single Australian solo guy who was attempting to do it on his own. And at Camp 2, when I stepped out to now push to Camp 3, when I'd reach by afternoon, rest, and that night we would start for push, this guy lay outside in the night. The winds were howling. Maybe he called out, we didn't hear. But he was lying there dead, barely 6 meters outside of my tent. And all along, though, I had seen dead bodies, but they were dead, like they were dead long ago kind of thing. This guy was someone I had met the previous afternoon. And to deal with that mentally saying, is this the right thing to do? Right? What about my children? What about my family? What happens to my parents? Am I being selfish? In pursuing my own dream at the cost of all of that? That was a challenge. Right? So at every stage to overcome that no from outside and the no within was the big challenge. Right? The Sherpa who went along, now interestingly, the Sherpas, poor things, they don't get paid much, but they do get what is called a summit bonus. Right? When your client reaches the summit camp, not summit, they get like $1,000, which is a bonus for them. So their interest lies in taking the client up to summit camp. After that, they'd rather have you come back. I was already way too old, right? And there they keep coming up with saying, so these Sherpas are trying to make money. So they have bets about anything and everything, nothing better to do with the camps. So, how many people from which team will climb? Will it rain or not rain? How many yaks will come into camp? All kinds of crazy bets that they have. And a big bet that was going on at the entire base camp was, would this old lady climb or not climb? Right? And people were betting both sides, and my own Sherpa, interestingly, was betting against the fact that I would not climb. So it actually made sense for him to ensure I didn't climb. So any step that I would slow down, he would ask me saying, should we go back? And I'd say, no, I'm going to go forward, okay? I don't care, but I'm going to go forward. So on our journeys, we do meet constantly people who are telling us no, and overcoming that, I think, is a challenge, sure. Right? You had a question.
Who was the support system during the journey?
Various people in that sense. The fact that my family didn't stop me from going, not that they were too excited about my going, but they didn't stop me. That I call a support system, right? The fact that in somewhere, the city that I run in, where I stay, it's safe enough for me to go out there and be there. I mean, while it's not, the police in that city are not people that I know directly, but it's a support system. Being part of a community or a culture that allowed a woman my age to go out there and climb, I think that's a support system, right? I wouldn't call out to any one particular individual because I think at every stage the battle was mine. I had to deal with it. But the fact that no one, and I'm not sure if somebody did say a direct no, would I still go? I think I would. So I don't know if I want to look at that. But at every stage when you want to achieve something, you are your only support system. Yeah. All right, somebody here. Yes.
How long did it take from base camp to reach out to the mountain?
So in terms of, the actual, like I said, the expedition is 2 months. But when you push for summit finally, we are staying at the advanced camp for a while, waiting for the good weather. And then from advanced camp to the summit is 3 days. So 3 days, or rather 2 nights and the third day that you go in, because that third night you are summiting and you're on top of the mountain. So advanced camp to camp 1 is the first day journey. You stay in camp 1 the first night. You move from camp 1 the next morning to get to camp 2, and you stay there the night. So that's your second night. The third day is when you move out and you get to camp 3, which is called your summit camp. You stay afternoon, you rest, and night you start your walk the 11 hours that I talked about, and the following morning is when you will reach, or you should reach, summit. So that's the journey in total. And then you come down in a day, of course, back to base camp, and then you sort of, catch your breath, and then you're back to, and all the excitement is over. Or 4 years of preparation and 2 months on the mountain. 4 days later, you're back home, and then you're wondering, what do I do with my life next? I think that's been a harder Everest, wondering what next, because I was just so sold on this one purpose, one focus, right? I've been, sort of being an Urdu student, the only word that comes to my mind is shiddat, right? It's this devotion that exists. It has to be like that you don't think of anything else. Everything is focused on that, and then when you come back, you don't know what to do with it next. So, yeah, well, that is where.
What encouraged you
Mm-hmm.
to push that last 400 meters or 300 meters up to the summit? How did you encourage yourself? Because that was the hardest.
It was. Also because,
What
so.
kept you going?
So for the North, for me, that particular year, we were 2 of us from the same state. There was a young boy, and I met him as I started after having convinced myself that there's the Australian dying, but let me not wait back, and I sort of have to go. And I met this boy just half an hour out on my walk, and his Sherpa was bringing him back, and this kid was crying, and he said, they're making me go back. And the Sherpa explained to me, he said, he's walking too slow, we're never going to make it. So rather than put that effort, I'm going to just turn him back, right? And in that space, I was thinking to myself, saying, is this really meant to be? I was roughly, like you said, about 300 meters short of the mountain. And I was physically tired. I was mentally messed up because of this guy. And I was asking myself, and I remember, I still distinctly remember that conversation with myself. I said, I'm almost at the top. No one in my family has come this high, right? This is good enough. No one's going to love me less because I didn't scale. It's important that I tried, right? After all, isn't it important? And I'm almost at the top. And luckily, I'm a big advocate of language. I say, your language creates your life patterns. It creates your narrative, and that becomes your life. And that almost word rang a bell. It said, well, you're almost at the top. You're not at the top. And that helped me plod on, saying, okay, now you can't, turn back and give up. Right? And I see that play out every time that I do things. Right? I mean, after having scaled Everest, I came back and I went out to run. There is this run that happens in South Africa, and it's 91 kilometers that you have to finish within 12 hours. And I came back and I went, attempted to go run that. And as I was preparing, everybody was telling me, saying, what's the big deal? I mean, you've gone to Everest. This was not going to be difficult for you. And next I know, I reached there, and it's a gun race, and it's a tough one. It has cutoffs, all of that. It's an entire hill race. It's hot. It starts from one place, goes to another place in Africa. And I missed by 128 kilometers, 128 meters. So I was at the gate of the stadium where we finished, and they fired the gun to say the race is over, right? Having run all those 90 point whatevers, to see this sort of failure there in front, and then everybody, the same people who said, it's so easy for you, you climbed Everest, turned around and said, oh, you did Everest, how come you missed this? So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's only your own talk that gets you through. Right? Do you want to give up? At every stage, you just have to keep saying, one step at a time. You haven't reached the finish line. And that has to be the constant chant. Also, very honestly, something that's helped me has been my faith, because I truly believe in the universe. It's not in terms of faith as a religion. It's just about faith in the universe. Ask for it and you will get. I've always said this. I was lucky the mountain allowed me to come up. It wasn't about I scaled or I conquered the mountain. It was about the mountain letting me come up, right? And that, the only thing that is in our hands are the efforts. So I put all of those in. I mean, whatever, as I said, that one goal and everything was aimed towards Everest. The last 3 months before I left, I had put in a tent in my room. And I would stay in the tent just to get used to living in constricted spaces, and that in the dark would I be able to find everything that I wanted. I picked up Nepali and I started speaking Nepali, just saying that on the mountain, if I get flummoxed and the guy doesn't understand me, am I able to speak the language, right? So all those goals, the efforts are what are yours, and you keep saying, I will not stop. I can slow down, but I will not stop till I reach what I've set out to reach. Yeah, so that really helps. That really helps. Yep. I think I'm done, largely. People are on with their questions too. And we are sort of on time. So thank you so much for letting me share my journey. And Sudhir, thank you for having me over. I had Zainab and Lulwa coordinate everything. They went back and forth. And so thank you once again. And wishing each one of you, successfully scaling your own Everests. So thanks a lot, and God bless. Thank you. Thank you.
For a person who started with Everest, what's next? Any other mountains? Oh my God.
It just doesn't end, does it? It's like a bug that bites you.
I know.
But yeah, but it's lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much.
You have a picture with
Yes, yes. Absolutely.
Very inspiring, very.